Mark lived on a quiet ranch at the edge of town. The land stretched wide, with open fields, a small barn, and a white wooden fence that he had built with his own hands. Most days were calm and peaceful. He cared for his animals, worked on small repairs, and enjoyed the fresh air that rolled down from the hills. It was the kind of life he wanted after years of travel and service. The ranch gave him comfort, and every sunrise felt like a new beginning. On one warm afternoon, Mark was fixing a loose board on the fence near the driveway. The sound of birds filled the sky, and the soft wind brushed against the tall grass. He placed his tools carefully on the ground and checked each nail to make sure the fence would hold strong. Just as he was about to finish, he heard the low hum of an engine. He looked up and saw a black SUV slowly rolling toward his gate. At first, nothing about the car seemed strange. Ranchers often had visitors, and Mark thought it could be a delivery, a neighbor, or maybe someone asking for directions. Still, the SUV was large, polished, and stood out against the dusty road. The way it moved was careful and deliberate. Mark stood tall and wiped his hands on his jeans as the vehicle came to a stop in front of the fence. The doors opened, and 4 men stepped out. Each wore a dark uniform with shiny badges pinned to the chest. The words HOA Security were printed across their jackets. Mark raised an eyebrow. His ranch was far from the neighborhood that had an HOA. Out here, people minded their own land, and there was no group that sent officers to check on houses. The sight of the uniforms made him curious. One man, tall and broad-shouldered, walked ahead of the group. He adjusted his cap and spoke with authority. "We're here to inspect your property for violations," he said. His voice was steady, but Mark caught a tone that felt rehearsed, like someone repeating lines from memory. Mark gave a polite nod. "Inspection? I wasn't informed about any inspection. Can I see your papers?" His words were calm, but inside, his mind was alert. The man smiled but did not reach into his pocket. Instead, he waved his hand casually. "It's a routine check. Nothing serious. We'll just need to take a look inside your house and around the barns." Mark did not move. His years of training had taught him to read small details. He studied the men carefully. Their boots were not the standard kind of local inspectors. The radios clipped to their belts were the type used by private security, not community officers. Even the SUV had no markings, no official signs, nothing that tied it to an actual organization. The second man, shorter and restless, stepped forward. He gripped the handle of the gate and gave it a small push, as if ready to walk in without permission. Mark placed his hand gently on the fence and shook his head. "Hold on. No one enters this ranch without proper documents. If this is official, then you have nothing to hide. Show me your ID and the order of inspection." The men exchanged quick glances. For a moment, silence hung in the air. The leader adjusted his cap again and laughed lightly. "Sir, there is no need to make this complicated. We are only doing our job." Mark smiled, but his eyes stayed sharp. "And I'm only doing mine. This is my land, and I protect it. If you want to come inside, you'll follow the rules." The air grew heavy with tension, though Mark never raised his voice. He wanted answers, and the men were not giving any. Something about the way they stood, the way they avoided eye contact, and the way they pressed forward without papers told him this was not a simple mistake. These were not the kind of visitors who had come to help. Yet Mark also knew one important truth. When faced with unknown situations, control was everything. He could not allow fear or anger to take over. Instead, he needed to guide the moment, to observe and learn. The leader gave another signal with his hand, and the group pulled back slightly. They huddled near the SUV, whispering to each other. Mark stayed still, watching carefully. He could feel his heart steady, not racing, but ready. His instincts told him this encounter was just beginning. As the men spoke in low voices, Mark thought about his ranch. Every piece of it held meaning. The fence he had built with care. The barn he had repaired after a long storm. The quiet porch where he enjoyed evenings with a book and a cup of tea. This was more than land. It was his safe place, his home. Whoever these men were, they had no right to step into it without respect. After a few moments, the leader turned back toward him with a confident smile. "We don't want trouble. We'll make this quick. Just let us inside for a few minutes." Mark crossed his arms. "If you want quick, then show me proper proof. Until then, you stay right where you are." The men looked uneasy. The one who had tried to push the gate earlier shifted on his feet, as if deciding whether to try again. Mark's steady gaze kept him in place. Years ago, in another life, Mark had faced situations far more dangerous than this. He knew the power of silence, the strength in calmness, and the way to keep control without lifting a finger. The birds that had been chirping earlier now seemed quiet, as if even nature was waiting to see what would happen next. The wind brushed against the tall grass once more, carrying with it a sense of watchfulness. Mark did not move from his place by the fence. He had asked a simple question, and until it was answered, he would not step aside. The men might have thought they were dealing with a simple rancher, but they had no idea who he really was or what kind of training rested quietly beneath his calm expression. For now, Mark held his ground. The black SUV glistened in the sun, the men stood restless, and the air between them was filled with unspoken tension. This was only the first moment in what promised to be a long day, and Mark knew the story of these visitors was far from over. Mark stood at the fence, facing the four men in dark uniforms. The sun was high above, casting long shadows across the ground. The men tried to look confident, but Mark noticed the way their eyes kept shifting and their feet kept moving. He knew how to read people. He had learned long ago that the smallest details often told the biggest truths. The leader of the group was tall, with a firm jaw and a steady voice. Yet when he spoke, his words felt heavy with something false. He kept saying it was a routine inspection, but he never answered the one simple request: proof. If they were truly there for an inspection, it should have been easy to show papers or identification. Instead, he gave excuses. Mark asked once more, calmly but firmly. "Do you have official documents? If this is routine, you must carry them." The leader hesitated, then reached toward his pocket, only to stop halfway. His hand froze, and he pulled it back without showing anything. Instead, he forced a small smile. "There is no need for papers. We are authorized. Just let us in." That moment told Mark everything he needed to know. They had no papers, and they had no right to be there. The second man, shorter and restless, stepped forward again. His movements were quick and nervous, like someone who could not wait any longer. He tapped his radio, even though no one spoke through it. "Sir, we don't have time for this," he said to the leader. His eyes darted toward the house, then back at the gate. Mark noticed this small gesture and filed it away in his mind. Why were they so eager to get inside the house? What could possibly be in his simple ranch home that interested them so much? The thought did not make sense, and the fact that it did not make sense was the first red flag. The third man stood back, quiet but watchful. He was slimmer than the others, and his eyes never left Mark. It was as if he was studying him, waiting for something to happen. The fourth man stayed near the SUV, leaning on the door and looking toward the road every few minutes, as if expecting someone else to arrive. Mark's calm voice broke the silence. "This land is private property. If you want to step in, you need official permission. That is the rule here." The leader gave a polite nod but did not move forward. "We understand, sir. But we are here under the authority of your homeowners association. We are simply doing our duty." Mark tilted his head slightly. "My ranch is outside the HOA boundary. That association does not cover this land." The leader's face stiffened. He quickly recovered with another forced smile. "There must be some misunderstanding. We will check and confirm. In the meantime, let us continue with the inspection." That was the second red flag. If they truly worked for the HOA, they would have known the boundary lines. Mark had lived here for years. He knew every piece of the map. The HOA did not have authority this far out. Mark leaned casually on the fence, pretending to be at ease. Inside, his mind was sharp and active. He thought about the way they had arrived without warning. He thought about their uniforms, which looked real at first glance but lacked the official patches. He thought about the SUV, clean and polished, yet missing the small license plate markers that most government or association vehicles carried. Each detail on its own was small, but together they painted a picture. These men were not who they claimed to be. The leader spoke again, this time with a firmer tone. "Sir, if you refuse to cooperate, we will have to mark you for non-compliance. That could lead to fines or penalties." Mark gave a small laugh, not out of rudeness, but out of disbelief. "Fines? For what? A fence? A barn? This is ranch land, not a neighborhood street. You are in the wrong place." The men exchanged glances once more. The restless one shifted from foot to foot, clearly frustrated. The quiet one kept staring at Mark, as though trying to measure his patience. The man by the SUV checked the road again. Mark realized something important at that moment. These men were not simply confused. They had a reason for being here, and that reason had nothing to do with fences or barns. The wind blew softly through the grass, carrying the faint sound of a bird in the distance. Mark used the moment to breathe slowly. Staying calm was the key. He reminded himself of something he had always believed: when people wanted something badly, they often revealed themselves without even knowing it. All he had to do was wait. He decided to test them. "Tell me this," he said in a friendly voice. "Which HOA office sent you? I will call them now and confirm." The leader's smile vanished for a brief second. His eyes flickered to the man near the SUV. Then, almost too quickly, he said, "We are from the main office. You do not need to call." That was the third red flag. Every official visit came with notice, a phone number, and a record. These men had none of that. Mark straightened his back and let his arms fall naturally at his sides. He gave no sign of fear, only quiet confidence. "Gentlemen," he said, "you are welcome to wait here while I make a call. If this is official, then everything will be cleared in minutes." The restless man shook his head, clearly annoyed. The leader raised a hand to stop him, then turned to Mark. His smile returned, but it no longer looked natural. "That will not be necessary. We will return another day." Mark nodded politely. "That sounds like a good idea." The men lingered for a moment, unsure of what to do next. The leader finally gave a signal, and they returned to the SUV. The doors closed, the engine started, and the vehicle rolled slowly back down the dusty road. Mark watched until it disappeared from view. He stood by the fence for a long time, silent, thinking about everything that had just happened. The visit was strange, and the red flags were clear. These men were not from any HOA. They were something else entirely. As the ranch grew quiet again, Mark picked up his tools and finished the last nail on the fence. But his mind was far from calm. He knew this was only the beginning. After the black SUV disappeared down the road, the ranch grew quiet again. The only sounds were the calls of distant birds and the steady creak of the wooden fence as it swayed lightly in the breeze. Mark stood there for several minutes, watching the road even though the vehicle was gone. His instincts told him the visit was not finished. Something about the way the men acted made it clear they would return. Mark picked up his tools and returned to the barn. He placed the hammer and nails neatly on the shelf and sat down on a wooden stool. His eyes scanned the barn, moving from the stacked hay bales to the old tractor parked in the corner. Everything around him was familiar, but now it all felt different. He knew his ranch had become a target, though he still did not understand why. He leaned back against the wall and closed his eyes for a moment. Memories of his years in the service came back to him. He remembered missions where he had to trust his instincts above all else. He remembered being trained to stay calm, to plan carefully, and to use the ground to his advantage. A ranch was no battlefield, but the lessons were the same. Whoever those men were, they had a plan. That meant he needed one too. The first step was awareness. Mark walked the property slowly, checking every corner as though seeing it for the first time. He studied the fence line, the barn doors, the open field behind the house, and the dirt road that led to the main gate. Every detail mattered. He wanted to know exactly where he had the upper hand if those men returned. At the porch, Mark knelt by a small wooden box fixed to the railing. Inside was a simple switch connected to a bell system he had designed himself. With one quick press, the bell would ring at his neighbor's ranch half a mile away. His neighbor, Tom, was also a retired serviceman. They had an understanding: if either man ever needed help, the bell would be the signal. Mark tested the switch. A soft click told him it was ready. He felt a sense of quiet relief. He was not alone in this. As evening approached, Mark sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The sky turned orange and pink, and the first stars began to appear. But his thoughts were not on the beauty of the sunset. His mind was sharp, replaying every detail of the earlier encounter. The way one man kept staring at him. The way another kept checking the road. The way they pushed to get inside. These were not random visitors. Just after nightfall, Mark noticed headlights in the distance. A vehicle moved slowly along the road, its beams cutting through the darkness. His heart steadied as he set down his cup. The black SUV was back. This time, the men did not stop at the gate. They drove past the entrance and parked near a grove of trees not far from the fence line. Mark watched carefully from the shadows of his porch. He counted the doors as they opened. 4 figures stepped out again, their dark uniforms blending into the night. Instead of walking directly to the gate, the men spread out. 2 moved toward the fence. 1 stayed near the vehicle. The leader stood at the edge of the field, scanning the house. They were quieter now, moving with purpose, as though they did not want to be seen. Mark's suspicions were confirmed. They were not inspectors. They were intruders with a reason to come at night. He pressed the switch on the porch railing. Somewhere in the distance, Tom's bell rang. Mark knew his neighbor would be on his way soon, though it might take several minutes. Until then, he had to manage the situation alone. Mark stepped off the porch and moved silently along the side of the house. The tall grass helped hide his figure. He stopped behind a large oak tree and watched as two of the men tried to open a section of the fence. They tugged at the wooden boards, clearly hoping to slip inside unnoticed. The leader gave quiet hand signals, directing them toward the barn. Their interest in the barn confirmed what Mark had guessed earlier. Whatever they wanted, they believed it was stored inside. Mark decided to act, but not with force. He knew from experience that patience often worked better than speed. If he revealed himself too early, the men might grow reckless. Instead, he wanted them in a position where he controlled the outcome. He circled through the shadows, moving toward the open field behind the barn. He knew the ground well and stepped carefully to avoid making noise. By the time the men reached the fence, Mark was already in position, waiting in the field where the moonlight cast a pale glow. When the first man finally slipped through the fence, Mark spoke from the darkness. "Looking for something?" The men froze. The leader spun around, searching for the voice. Mark stepped forward slowly, his figure tall and steady in the dim light. "This ranch is private land," he said firmly. "I gave you your chance earlier. Now you are here at night, without papers, without reason. Why?" For a moment, no one spoke. Then the restless man muttered, "We do not have time for this." He took a step forward, but the leader raised his hand, stopping him. The leader tried to keep his voice calm. "Sir, please, this does not have to be difficult. We only need to check your barn. That is all." Mark shook his head. "The barn holds nothing for you. What you are doing is not inspection. It is trespassing." The men shifted uncomfortably. Their plan was clearly not going the way they expected. Just then, a distant bark carried through the night air. Mark smiled faintly. That was Tom's dog. His neighbor was close. The leader noticed the sound too. His jaw tightened. "We should leave," he whispered to his team. The men backed away, slipping through the fence again. They hurried to the SUV and climbed inside. The vehicle roared to life, headlights flashing across the field. In seconds, it turned and sped down the road, disappearing once more into the night. Mark stood quietly in the field, watching until the lights were gone. A moment later, Tom arrived with his dog trotting beside him. "Everything all right?" Tom asked. Mark nodded. "For now. But they will be back. And next time, they may not leave so quickly." The two men stood in the quiet field, the stars above them shining brightly. The ranch was safe for the moment, but Mark knew this was only a pause in a much larger story. The night after the second visit passed slowly for Mark. He hardly slept, though he rested in his chair on the porch with his eyes half closed. Every sound in the distance made him alert again. The call of an owl, the rustle of the wind in the trees, even the creak of the barn door shifting in the breeze, all of it kept him awake. His instincts told him this was not over. By sunrise, Tom came by again with his dog. "They will return," Tom said in a quiet voice. "People who move like that, they don't give up so easily." Mark nodded. "I agree. They wanted something inside the barn. They did not even hide that fact. The question is, what do they believe is there?" Both men looked at the barn. It was an old structure, built years ago, with nothing inside but hay, tools, and a tractor that had not run in months. There was no treasure, no secret equipment, nothing that would attract strangers. Yet for some reason, those men were convinced it mattered. Mark decided to prepare. The ranch was not just a home, it was also a place where he had invested time, skill, and care. He knew every inch of it, and that gave him an advantage. All morning, he worked with quiet focus. He checked the gates, tested the locks, and walked the fence line once more. He made sure the bell system to Tom's ranch was working perfectly. He even cleared the ground in front of the barn, brushing away loose hay and dirt so he could notice if anyone stepped there later. Every move was part of his plan. In the afternoon, Tom returned to help. Together, they placed lanterns in certain spots around the property. The lanterns would give light in some places while leaving others in shadow, guiding strangers into areas where Mark wanted them to go. It was not a trap in the sense of harm, but a way of directing movement. By evening, everything was ready. Mark sat on the porch again with a calm face, though his mind was sharp. Tom stayed nearby, choosing a position where he could see both the road and the barn. They agreed not to act quickly. Patience was their greatest tool. As the sky darkened and stars began to appear, the sound of an engine echoed faintly in the distance. The black SUV had returned. This time, the vehicle did not stop at the trees. It rolled boldly up to the gate and parked in full view. The headlights cut across the field, and the engine shut off. The doors opened, and the four men stepped out once more. Mark stood from his chair and walked slowly to the fence. His steps were steady, his face calm. "Back again?" he asked, his voice firm but polite. The leader of the group did not smile this time. His eyes were serious. "We will not waste more time, sir. We must enter the barn. This is official business." Mark raised a brow. "Official? Then show me proof. Show me papers. Show me anything that confirms what you say." The leader did not respond. The restless man muttered, "We don't need to explain." His voice was sharp, but the leader silenced him with a quick glance. Mark took a step closer to the fence. "This is your last chance to do this the right way. If you have authority, then prove it. If not, then leave." The leader's eyes narrowed. He did not move, but Mark noticed his shoulders tense. The quiet man at the back shifted his stance, watching closely. The fourth man near the SUV glanced around as though waiting for something. The air between them grew heavy, filled with tension. For several moments, no one spoke. Then, in a calm but firm tone, Mark said, "This land is protected. I will not open the gate for lies." From behind the barn, Tom's dog barked loudly. The sudden sound made the restless man jump slightly. Tom himself stepped into view a moment later, standing tall with a lantern in his hand. "You should listen to him," Tom said. "You're not welcome here without proof." The four men turned their eyes toward Tom. Their leader's face tightened. He had not expected someone else to be present. Mark used the moment to keep control. "There are two of us," he said, his voice calm but firm. "And there may be more. Think carefully before you decide your next step." The men hesitated. Their plan was once again slipping away. The leader looked from Mark to Tom, then back to Mark. He seemed to weigh his choices, but pride kept him from leaving immediately. "We will return," the leader finally said. His voice carried a warning, but his words were thin compared to the firm presence of Mark and Tom. Mark nodded once. "Return only if you bring truth. Otherwise, do not waste your time." The men stepped back, returning to the SUV. The restless one muttered something under his breath, but the leader said nothing. They climbed inside, the engine started, and the vehicle pulled away once more into the night. Mark and Tom stood silently, watching until the tail lights vanished down the road. The night grew quiet again, but both men knew this was not the end. Tom spoke first. "They will keep coming. Each time, they test more. Each time, they push harder." Mark agreed. "Yes. They believe something is here, and until they find out otherwise, they will not stop." They walked back to the porch together. The lantern light glowed warmly, casting long shadows on the ground. Mark poured 2 cups of tea, and the men sat in silence for a while. The quiet of the ranch was calming, but their minds remained alert. After some time, Tom said, "What do you think they want?" Mark stared at the barn in the distance. "I do not know. But I do know this: next time, we must be ready for more than words." The 2 men sat in silence again, the night stretching long and still. The stars above shone brightly, and the air was cool with the scent of grass. Yet beneath the calm surface, both men felt the same truth. The confrontation was not finished. It was only moving closer to its peak. The night after the 3rd visit, Mark stayed awake longer than usual. He sat on the porch with his lamp burning softly beside him, the glow reaching only a short distance into the yard. Beyond that, the land was wrapped in quiet darkness. He could not shake the feeling that the next time the men returned, they would not leave so easily. Tom had gone back to his own ranch but promised to be ready at the first signal. The bell system gave Mark comfort, but he still felt the weight of responsibility. This was his land. He could not rely on others to carry the burden. If the strangers came back, it was his job to protect the place he called home. Morning came slow and steady. The sky turned gold, and the soft sounds of roosters filled the air. Mark walked the property again, checking the barn, the fences, and the gates. He noticed faint footprints near the fence line from the night before, proof that the men had tried once again to test his defenses. The marks reminded him that this was no dream. The threat was real. By midday, Mark prepared as carefully as he had ever done before. He placed a fresh lock on the barn, one that would show any attempt to tamper with it. He set the lanterns in different places to control the light after sunset. He cleared a path behind the barn, making sure he could move quickly if needed. He even set out water for Tom's dog, knowing the animal might be part of the night ahead. In the evening, Tom arrived with his dog by his side. Together, they walked the land, speaking little but thinking much. Finally, Tom broke the silence. "I believe tonight will be the night. They will not wait much longer." Mark agreed. "I feel the same. They will return, and they will push harder. But this time, we are ready." As the sun went down, the men took their places. Mark remained on the porch with his lamp, calm and steady. Tom waited near the barn with his dog, hidden in the shadows. The night grew still, the stars appeared, and the sound of crickets filled the air. Then, not long after dark, the familiar hum of an engine came from the road. The black SUV approached once again. Its headlights shone briefly across the field before switching off. The vehicle rolled quietly up to the gate and stopped. The doors opened, and the 4 men stepped out. Their movements were slower now, more deliberate. They did not speak at first, but their eyes scanned the land carefully. This time, they knew they were expected. The leader stepped forward. His voice carried across the fence. "We are here once more. This must be settled tonight. Mark rose from his chair and walked to the fence. His steps were unhurried, his face calm. "You have been here many times already," he said. "Each time, you fail to bring proof. What makes this night different?" The leader did not smile. "We cannot leave without looking inside the barn." Mark shook his head. "You cannot enter without permission. This land is private, and the barn is locked. If you believe otherwise, then bring the sheriff. Until then, you have no authority here." The restless man shifted again, as he always did. He muttered under his breath, clearly impatient. The quiet man at the back kept his eyes locked on Mark. The fourth man, near the SUV, tapped his radio, though no sound came from it. Mark noticed every detail. He spoke again, steady and firm. "If you want honesty, bring honesty. If you want respect, give respect. Until then, you will find nothing here." The leader's jaw tightened. For the first time, his voice carried frustration. "We know what we are looking for is here. Do not stand in our way." From the shadows near the barn, Tom stepped forward with his lantern glowing. His dog barked sharply, the sound cutting through the night. "You are the one standing in the wrong place," Tom said. "You have no right to be here. You should leave while you still can." The four men turned their heads toward Tom. They had not expected him to appear again. Their leader hesitated, and in that moment of pause, the sound of another engine came from the road. This one was different, lower, heavier, official. Headlights swept across the field, and a sheriff's truck pulled up behind the SUV. The doors opened, and two deputies stepped out, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The sheriff himself followed, his presence calm but commanding. Mark felt a wave of quiet relief. Earlier in the day, he had sent a message to the sheriff's office, explaining what had been happening. The sheriff had promised to stop by, and now he had arrived at exactly the right moment. The deputies approached the fence. "Evening, gentlemen," one of them said. "We received a report about suspicious activity at this ranch." The leader of the four men tried to respond quickly. "We are here on official business for the Homeowners Association." The sheriff shook his head. "I already spoke to the HOA office this morning. They confirmed they have no connection to you. That means you are here without authority." The leader's face fell. The restless man muttered again, but this time the quiet man looked away, as if he already knew the truth had caught up with them. The sheriff continued, his voice steady. "You have been warned before, but now it is finished. You will not return here again. This ranch belongs to its owner, and you will respect that." The four men stood still, realizing their plan had ended. The deputies guided them back toward their SUV, and under the watchful eyes of the sheriff, they left the property. Their vehicle rolled down the road, disappearing into the distance for the last time. The night grew quiet again. The crickets sang, and the stars glowed brightly above. Mark stood at the fence, his hands resting calmly on the wood. Tom joined him, his dog wagging its tail now that the tension had passed. The sheriff stepped closer. "You handled this well, Mark. You stayed calm, and you were right to call us. Whatever those men were after, it is not here. But they will not trouble you again." Mark gave a small nod. "Thank you, Sheriff. I only wanted peace on this land." The sheriff tipped his hat. "And peace you will have. We will keep an eye out for them." When the sheriff and his deputies left, the ranch returned to its natural silence. Mark and Tom stood for a moment, letting the calm settle over them. Finally, Tom said, "It's over now." Mark looked out across the open fields, the barn, the fences, and the quiet house. "Yes," he said softly. "It's over. This land is safe." The two men walked back to the porch. They sat in their chairs, poured fresh cups of tea, and watched the stars. For the first time in days, the ranch felt peaceful again. Mark thought of all that had happened. The strangers had come with false claims, but in the end, truth and patience had won. He had stood his ground, and his home remained his. The ranch was quiet, steady, and strong. And as the night stretched on, Mark felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had chosen this life for its peace, and now that peace had been protected.